here. We have Sarah Cox, Maria Hugh, Markus Fuller, and Ashley Voggt here to share with us their experience transitioning out of their doc programs into their first positions after their doc program and what that was like and successes and challenges. So thank you all for being here today. We'll start by just asking you to describe your doc program, where you were at, the length of the program, the focus of the program when you completed, and then your current position. Sarah, if you'd like to go first.
Sure, I'm happy to. So I graduated from Florida State University in August of 2019. I started the program, well, I was in a grant-funded program through OSEP that was called ASD STEM. It focused on teaching STEM to students with autism spectrum disorder and research surrounding that area. I came in a little bit later than the rest of my cohort, so I started in January and it took me about 3.5 years to finish. I worked there with Dr. Root and Dr. Kelly Whalen, and then when I finished, I stayed for an extra year and did a postdoc with Dr. Root in her research lab. And now I am at Eastern Michigan University as an assistant professor in special education. I think I answered your question.
Thank you, Sarah. Yep. Markus?
Good afternoon or evening, everyone, depending on where we're at. My name is Markus Fuller. I use he, him pronouns. I did my PhD at Texas A&M University under Jenny Gans and Kimberly Vaness. So very big in kind of behavior-oriented sciences, which I love. The program took about 4 years. My research was more focused on performance feedback with students and teachers with emotional behavior disorders. So after graduating from that program, I am now a visiting lecturer at the University of Vermont. And I do need to apologize because I'm pretty much in a flight path. So there might be some times where you hear a little bit more noise than just my voice.
Thank you, Markus. Maria?
Hey everyone, I'm Maria Hugh. I use she, her pronouns, and I graduated in June 2020, so a year ago. I also have planes above me, so thanks for, you might hear those. June 2020 from the University of Minnesota in my degrees in education psychology, and our program there has a program for special ed as part of that. So I worked with Dr. Leanne Johnson and Veronica Fleury while Veronica was with us, and was also fortunate to be an OSEP fellow on the National Center for Leadership and Intensive Intervention. There's some flexibility, but most of us, they try to keep us in 4 years. So I graduated in 4 years, and focused on using implementation science approaches to support educators in using effective practices in schools for students with autism and especially young kids. Now I'm an IES postdoctoral fellow at the University of Washington Smart Center, which is our school-based mental health assessment, research, and training center, doing basically the same thing, implementation science approaches to use mental health interventions across tiers for all students in schools.
Thank you, Maria. Ashley?
No, I'm not muted. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Voggt. I also use she, her pronouns. And I am a recent fairly recent, within the year or so, recent graduate of the doctoral program at UNC Charlotte. I am currently an assistant professor at TAM UCC and Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. Our doctoral program at UNC Charlotte, I graduated in 2020. So I was actually the first doctoral student to ever defend a dissertation online, which was kind of interesting, and definitely not the last since me, but yes, our program is very rigorous there. It's meant to do 3 years full time. So I was one of 2 other doctoral students in my cohort that went full time and completed within 3 years. So I started in 2017 and graduated in 2020 and accepted an assistant professor position before graduation. So that was nice. And the focus of the program there is, my focus was on transition, of course, and working with students with extensive support needs, youth with extensive support needs. And we do also a lot of work in terms of leadership and multi-tiered systems of supports.
Thank you, Ashley. So appreciate hearing about your background and kind of where you are. And so if you would mind next telling us what was most exciting about that transition? So leaving your doc program, starting the new position, what was the most exciting part of that? And we'll go in the same order.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I would say the application piece. So it felt like you were graduating and actually getting to do all the things that you had been trained to do. You are now a butterfly that is released into the wild and get to practice those things. I guess I don't know. It's the feeling of being treated as an equal, being respected, coming into this environment and sharing what you have to bring to the table, learning from others what they bring to the table. I was extremely fortunate that at Florida State we were treated very, very well, and I had a lot of opportunities. It just was a different feeling, I guess, for me. It wasn't less about how others were treating me and more about how I viewed myself.
Yeah, very kind of similar to go off that. I think what was also exciting was probably the most scary was that level of independence now that you have, because you're a lecturer or you're a professor. There's not anymore somebody, the teacher of record that technically gets the blunt if you don't come to class or if you forget it. It's all you. And while that is terrifying, it's also your syllabus. It's also the way you want to teach. It's also having those joys to kind of take all those things that you've been learning and finally, like, I can almost do whatever I want in this classroom. And having that courage to really kind of try some new things was probably one of my biggest excitements, to just say, like, all these ideas that I have, let's see what sticks to the wall, and then just be upfront with my students, like, hey, this is my first time doing this too. Like, I'm going to fail, so you need to let me know. I think I'm great until you tell me I'm not great. So I think that was another big joy, is to kind of start having those relationships as well with your students that you didn't get when you were just the student teacher, or you were just the person who had to do like the practicum teaching from it. So that was really cool.
All of this sounds really exciting. I'm like, oh, that sounds good. I want that too. Right now I'm in a really solely research position. So my excitement is kind of around that research. I was just excited to go join a center where there were a bunch of researchers who I had, pulled from their work for my own work over the years, and to actually see how they did that work and connected with schools. That was exciting for me. And I think, of course, there was more, as I imagine most of you feel in your doc programs. I probably could have done that with Minnesota people too, but just having that opportunity to go and dig in and learn from these studies where I have a lot of overlap, but I'm really building these new skills that it takes time to learn and hadn't done yet.
I think that for me, coming out of a doctoral program with, we were very heavy into collaboration and support, and feeling connected that way, to uprooting and going into another place is a level of excitement of its own, because you're just taking a chance, you're taking a leap, and just hoping that things kind of go well. And I felt instantly connected really to the people that I worked with and was talking to in terms of applying to this position, especially. So I was eager for that excitement. I was ready for the change. I knew what I was getting into in terms of uprooting and moving to a different state, and bringing my family with me too, which is a whole other level of excitement for them as well. But I also work in a very small department. It's me and one other faculty member, and we have an arm of extension as well in terms of diagnosticians in special education. So coming into a program knowing that it was small and also requiring a lot of development in the first year that I was here, knowing that that was going to be a focus of my attention really for the first year coming out of my doctoral program, was also exciting to know that I would be contributing to building this up and working in a collaborative way differently, while it was different from my doctoral program, but it was still collaboration and a level of support as well. That was exciting.
Thanks, Ashley. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate hearing about that. So when you move to your new positions, you have all this excitement. So what ways did your doc program prepare you for the position you currently have?
So I had the opportunity to do a lot of research with several different faculty, which was very beneficial. I got to see different ways of conducting research from the beginning to the end. So how do you come up with a research question? What happens when how you originally planned on doing this doesn't work? How do you make changes? How do you make those decisions as you go, all the way through reporting those results? So I feel very fortunate that I had exposure to many different people and learned a lot about how to do that independently. And then I also had the opportunity to teach several classes, and it was kind of scaffolded for me. So the first semester I was watching someone else do it. The next semester I was doing it independently, and then towards the end I had the opportunity to do an online class, luckily, because everything has been online for a year. So I think just the diversity of experiences really helped me figure out how to balance the research part and the teaching part. Service is a different story.
Yeah, so at Texas A&M University, the program in special education is pretty research intensive. And at the University of Vermont, as a visiting lecturer, I actually do pretty much the opposite of that research intensive. A lot of focus on teaching and student supervision. So as Sarah was saying, that teaching placement that I had during my doc program with that scaffolding, first semester kind of watching second semester teaching, was super, super helpful. But I think more than any particular thing was I would say definitely the relationships that I built in those times. One of the main reason, while I will admit that, I have the accolades of everything, but the main reason why I'm at the University of Vermont is because of some of those relationships that I built, to where the chair here was like, what are you doing after graduation? Like, there's spots here. We need people like you. So having those interactions at conferences and being able to network with like-minded people and people who totally know something vastly different than you, but still finding those links with each other to be able to do that, I think was one of the best things. And then too, with it not being as intense in research, me having those networks allows me to continue my research at a place where might not been super the most upfront thing that they're worried about. So
I was thinking about this, and there's probably so many things that I'm not going to highlight that were that I was prepared in, and my mentors would be like, and you learned this. But some of the ones to highlight, I think, are like Markus was saying. I was fortunate for our OSEP fellowship. It's a consortium. So to meet people for the National Center for Leadership and Intensive Intervention and know how to translate the work that I'm doing, that they do, with maybe a different population, but quite similar. So to be able to kind of connect those research dots has just been helpful for my research thinking, to help me think kind of out of the box, and also how can my work benefit more than just one subpopulation of students. Again, I'm in a research position, so most of the work that I'm doing is about research, and I was really fortunate to have independent research opportunities in my doc program that helped, I think, prepare me for this role. As a postdoc, you're still fortunate to have a mentor, and so there's someone to ask questions to, and you're supposed to do that, so you're not supposed to be embarrassed when you do it. And so that's great, but at the same time, if you don't ask those questions, they will trust that you know what you're doing, usually a little differently than when you're a doc student, just at a different point in your training. So feeling like having some confidence in the decisions that I make, and knowing when to ask questions or where to look for things, that I think really helped prepare me. But I think the biggest takeaway is that you should ask questions whenever you have them, because you want to make sure you're doing things as well as they can be done to serve our students.
It's great. I also walked away from my doctoral program feeling really prepared. Although it's still a learning curve, you're in your first year in a faculty position. Of course, I'm still asking so many questions too, all the way up the chain from my colleagues to our chair to even the dean at times. So definitely, I definitely agree with you, Maria, on that. But I like the fact that my doctoral program and the pillars that we built our program around of what we value in terms of research, of leadership, of teaching really aligned well to the position that I'm in right now too. So in that way, we had activities and learning experiences, and we're building partnerships with each other and collaborating with each other around those areas that have continued really through my position now. So for example, in teaching, being able to make the courses my own based on the experience that I was given in the doctoral program, in that scaffolded way too, because we had a way to watch, observe, jump in here and there for lessons, and then pick up more and more responsibilities throughout the program. And now being able to come here and make courses my own according to the structure of learning that I learned best from my doctoral program, and just really applying more rigor even than that was possibly there before. So in a way, just applying what I learned in my doctoral program to enhance the courses that are already in place here has been something that I was doing for the first year. And I felt really successful doing that and offering more to the students than what they would have been given in the first place. So that's really, really important. But then of course, in terms of research, my personal research has really not been the focus of my first year. It's been more getting my feet under me and doing the program development that I've been doing. So having ongoing projects and ongoing collaboration through my doctoral program has been really helpful as well.
Thank you. So what was the most challenging about your transition to your current position, and in what ways have you worked to overcome that challenge?
So I was at Florida State in some capacity for 10 years. And with that, I had had multiple positions before I started my doc program. So I knew a lot of the people, even though it is the capital, it's a relatively small town, everybody, and you get to know like where the resources are and who to go to. And I felt really connected. And when I came to Michigan, I felt completely isolated. It didn't help that we moved in the middle of COVID, as I'm sure many of you did. But I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know who to ask, and students would come to me for resources. And I thought, that's a really great question. Let me go find out so that I can tell you, so that, you get what you need and I have that answer for the next student. So I think that piece of it, the missing of where do you go for what information? Because like my colleagues have talked about, it was such a crucial part of my doctoral experience that you do have that opportunity to ask questions and find out from experts. And here I am now supposed to be the expert, and I feel like I'm relearning where to get answers to all of these questions.
Yeah, I would probably say very similar things on top of the fact of originally the company that was supposed to move me shut down. So then I had to move myself across the 31 hours from Texas A&M University up to Burlington, Vermont. So once we get past all the COVID stuff that I'm sure all of us have a crazy story about how we got to A to Z, I think the biggest thing was being a transplant, and I guess this is part of like the COVID thing too, being a transplant that couldn't explore the area. I think a big reason, and kind of just as Sarah said about not knowing who to go to for what, was a lot of the fact that all of my interactions was on this screen that we're all on right now. So like not knowing where the registrar was, or not knowing where the student center was, or things like that maybe I wouldn't actually use as a professor, but are good links to other organizations and student supports. I felt that I wasn't as prepared to provide that to my students. But having those one or two persons that I was just like, you are probably not the person to go to, but you're one of 3 friends I have in this area, so you're getting all the questions. And just having someone who was just like, no, that's fine, I know how to direct you to this, that, and that place, was probably my biggest relief off of my shoulders. And I just apologized and sent Starbucks gift cards to her whenever I could, because I'm like, I know I'm making you do more work, but again, you are my lifeline to the connection of how things usually run in a way that like I can't provide that opportunity right now.
So I actually, until like last month, was working from Minnesota still in Washington. So it is also hard for me to disentangle the COVID effects with my, onboarding and newness. So I'm not going to try. Why try things that are hard? But I think for me, I love being with people. I love being part of a community. So it's hard when you're moving somewhere new. You don't know the school systems. We're also, being cautious of asking much of our school systems right now, and have transitioned to our work being remote with them just to reduce the burden, because it's possible for the work that we're doing. But in addition to that kind of disconnect with the community, that was challenging. Just not really having time to do a little office talk or meet people in person. It's hard to get to know your colleagues. So one thing that we have done, so there were 3 IES postdocs that started at the same time, which was really nice. But I think in other positions, even when you don't have that, you might see there's another new professor in another department or something like that. I think it's really nice to connect with each other, and it can kind of create that cohort sense where the newness is not unique to you. So we just, on our first day, emailed each other, gave each other our phone numbers, set up a time to just meet each other on Zoom. And they've become some of my dearest friends and colleagues just in that way over this time. The other thing, if you do have a mentor, if you're in a professor role, or and you have kind of, I'm missing the word, but a mentor, a colleague who can help be your guide at different points, or a postdoc role, I think it's important, as long as they're able, to try and make regular meetings. You feel like you're asking something of someone, but if you don't have it on the books, it's easy to not make that time and build those relationships. So that's kind of another strategy that I use that I think has really helped get over some hurdles of any transition, but particularly a pandemic transition.
I would absolutely echo a lot of the challenges that were experienced here in terms of making a move that affects not only yourself, but your family, whoever you are bringing with you, or are leaving behind. Even, for me, it was North Carolina. My husband's from Germany. So we also had a child right before I moved as well. So actually his family has never even met their grandson yet. So we've got this, this whole dynamic really of different layers of the life outside of these programs and of these things that we're doing professionally. But that sort of trickles in and adds stress in different ways too, to acknowledge that. But also, I would say, when you're moving, and even though I come from North Carolina and it is the South, going to Texas, there's a different culture that you're trying to understand and really fit into that is very different. So I found that to be really challenging, and learning the politics. I was not really involved in that as a doc student, of course. And now you have a hand in certain problems, say, for example, with students and attendance, or with ethics and things like that, that you just weren't really knee deep in before. You may have been aware of it or anything, but you weren't really the one who was in charge of disciplinary action or something, of bringing those to the attention of disciplinaries. So I found that to be one of the biggest challenges for me this year, really, to know that while I'm lucky and fortunate enough to be at an institution that for the vast majority of the students here, they take their education very seriously and they're very dedicated, and that's wonderful. But there's still some challenges there with the politics, I found.
Thank you. So is there something you wish you would have done within your doc program that would have made your transition easier?
I will say two things. First, I wish I would have gotten involved in the service aspect a little bit more. I think I treated it as like, this is not something that I need to do right now, so I'm just gonna leave it. And even looking back now, I'm not exactly sure what I would have been able to do, but there were many opportunities to get involved as a student. And I just kept saying to myself, I'm too overwhelmed. I can't possibly pick up anything else. And it would have been really good practice because it is part of your job if you go into faculty life. And then the second thing, like Ashley was saying, the political dynamics within the college, within a department, I really stayed out of as a doc student. I was kind of aware of it on the periphery. I have, people in my life that are in an academic role, so I was aware of them, but I do not possess the skills to navigate them. And I wish that I would have done more to learn about different strategies and how do you say no to something that you think is not a good idea? How do you know whether, because when you join anywhere new, from what I understand, you get this onslaught of opportunities that are thrown at you. Join this, do this. Oh, you'd be great for this. And I knew that I should say no to some of them, but I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know which ones to say no to. I didn't know those, like how to navigate that. And so I guess I wish I would have paid better attention to my very savvy advisors who did this seamlessly. And I don't know how they did. So it's like this mystery to me that I should have done a better job paying attention to how they made those choices.
So honestly, I am very happy for my program and the way they prepared me. I always tell people that, when you realize that I went to Texas A&M, I put the caveat that like, no, I'm from special education, because like that college is very different than issues that are happening at the university. We'll use those words. So as Sarah was saying, I kind of had that practice of saying no and figuring out maybe too much of like the political movements and pushes that happen. But I will say like the biggest difference is knowing that like every university isn't like that. Right. So then when I came to Vermont and the same thing, they're asking, be on this committee, be on that committee. I'm like, are you asking me because you want me to be the token? Like, am I just the checkbox and everything? And they're like, no, we really want your opinion. And it's just like, that was too refreshing for me because I came from a place that was trying to check boxes, or at least it seemed like that sometimes. So I think one of the things that I wish I would have had in the experience was have experiences to, and I don't even know how this would like actually manifest, but have experiences to work in other institutions so I could get more of a vibe like every institution isn't like yours. Because when you've been embodied in some place for 3 or 4 years, you think nothing else but like what's going on in your bubble. So when I moved up here, I was like, oh wait, I can relax a little bit and I can try to take things for more face value and look at things from a different point of view. So that was the biggest change that I had to do.
Those are helpful for me to think about. Thank you for sharing those. There's kind of some logistical things like grant writing that we were fortunate. We had a grant writing class at Minnesota. I took that class. I tried to write a grant, but I actually never submitted a grant. And in research, you have to find money to do your research. So I wish I had taken the time to actually submit a small grant or something like that, given it a try, maybe gotten feedback, maybe not, but at least had tried sort of those things. I will say we were fortunate in NCLAI again to get some extra training on that as well. And now I think for those of you who are coming upon graduation or recently graduated, there's a lot of stuff online that like Dad and others like the Division for Research and stuff have done. And so I think there are ways to supplement that if you don't have time in your program or it's just not a priority in your program of study at that time. There was one other thing I was just thinking about as Markus was talking that I don't want to forget, but I worry that I have. The other thing is mentorship. So it's important to me to be a good mentor. And I don't think I don't remember any plainly obvious opportunities to be a mentor that I turned down, maybe to students who were earlier in the program, but I kind of wish I had found a way to do that, to build those real skills and relationships before going into a position in the future, but also now where I'm mentoring. So that's something that I think in any role that we would be in, most of us will end up doing that, and would have been nice to spend some more time thinking through that myself in my program.
I'm glad that I'm last because I can say, yes, I agree with everyone who has come before me, and but try to add in something too of my own here. I would say that, and this is maybe just a personal learning curve for me in general, but the expedited process that we go through in the doc program at UNC Charlotte, I would have liked to had some more training, and just to feel a little bit more confident in what I learned, because I think that there's a surface level of learning and then you can get deeper into your learning too, and I just know that much of that deeper level learning is coming now independently while I'm kind of in the move here, and putting it in the moment, putting it to work. Specifically, I'm talking about grant writing too. We did have one class, so having that is beneficial, of course, but to feel confident, I mean, I don't know if you ever get to a point where you're just kind of like, I got this, but, and maybe in 50 years from now, I will feel that way, but we'll see. Statistics, I mean, like just general things, the skills that you learn to just interact with, problem solve, with ethics especially too, that we're coming across. I think that having a little bit more training around that to give myself a little bit more confidence would be something that I would request, or that I think would be beneficial. But then at the same time, I don't know how much more that I would need to feel really confident. I think it's just a personal thing for me. And perhaps I get there eventually, but, and maybe we're all just kind of like, oh, kind of figure it out as we go. And there's a lot of things that, we don't really know for sure, but we're like, oh, well, that worked out pretty well. Good that, kind of dodged a bullet there or whatever, but that, other than that, I feel like I was, again, really well prepared in a lot of the ways that I was expected to come into this position and do the things that I'm doing.
Thank you. So several of you have kind of touched on is you have so many new opportunities in your new position. So how do you navigate them, and how have you navigated them in these first year or two?
So I will be fully transparent. My very first faculty meeting, I was asked to select 3 committees to be on live, like in person. And that was a position I wasn't just not prepared for. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. So I selected the committees, and then afterwards I talked to some friends who are faculty members, and they were like, no, you should have said no. I will look at them and I will get back to you. Like, you have that autonomy. Just because they've asked you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. So looking back, I think that probably is something I would have done a little differently. And other than that, it has been working with other people to find out, like, what does this really entail? So after that moment in time, if somebody asked me to do something, it was having an additional meeting to find out, what does this mean? How much time is it going to involve? Who does it benefit? How does it benefit them? Like, finding out all of the details before I really agreed to do it, and finding some of the language of, how do you tell someone no? How can you say, thank you, this is a great opportunity, I think it's really important, however, I don't have time for it right now, instead of just telling them, no thanks, but thanks anyways. It just is language, I guess, finesse that I did not have at the beginning, that I'm trying to learn.
Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, same thing, you're the new faculty. Hey, do you want to join this committee? Join this committee. I think I've actually talked to Elizabeth a little bit about this phrasing. Is I have this phrase that says, I'm sorry, that doesn't add to me. And basically, like, what I'm saying is, like, we all have our lines of research. We're all great. We know someone who can do what you've asked for that. That's not going to benefit me in like producing or progressing my research, which means I'm not going to be able to be beneficial to you as the department, because you hired me to do the things that I'm good at, right? So like if I'm stretching too far, then I'm not going to be able to do what you think I can do. So my phrasing, and I've tried to get some of my friends and other colleagues to like adopt this, and it originally came from the OSEP internship that I did in DC, was just like, I'm sorry, but that doesn't add to me. I will help you find someone else, but this work's just not aligning with the things I have in place right now. And I don't see how it could benefit each other. Like it couldn't benefit either of us from working together. I think a big thing is just knowing who you are. Like I'm a person that if I don't like what I'm doing, unfortunately, there's no motivation. Like there's not an amount of money. You can't tell me to buy out of a course. Like if I don't like the research, it doesn't matter how important or what I think it is. It's not going to be for me. But through networking, I know a lot of people who it could be for. So trying to just kind of get those people in place where you need to, and just have to be upfront. Like, I'm so sorry. Again, this is a great opportunity, but I don't think that will add to me. So I'm going to have to say no.
I'm literally taking notes. But and Jenny, what Jenny just put in the chat that I want to call attention to is nice transition to what I was thinking. As she said, the phrase from NCFDD, maybe faculty diversity, is that aligns with my values and not my priorities right now. So I'm really, our position is quite flexible as IES postdocs, and we get to work on different projects and work on our own projects and spend time on our professional development. So it's different than a faculty position where like my goal is solely to grow and contribute as I do so. But as part of that, it's really hard to sometimes figure out which projects might be a best fit at any given time based on what I'm trying to learn, how I can contribute to them, and then where they are in their time point. So every project sounds interesting. I want to go to all the meetings, and then I don't actually have time to do anything. So what I try to do is, and I have to like make intentional time for this, for whatever that's worth to people. Like next week, I'm going to carve out time to sit down and like revisit these things, is think about my values. So like, does this align with my values and my goals, which those are intertwined. But if it's not something that can help me, that aligns with my values, so if it's not about helping achieve equity at our workplace or for students with disabilities, and goals for my professional development to help, again, align my life with those values, then it's easier for me to say thanks, but no thanks. Still also working on the phrasing for that. One thing I've recently started doing is I'd love to join an initial meeting to see, to learn from it and see if I'm able to commit fully. This is a new phrase I practiced today. And I hope that that's okay to people. So that's one way. It's like, I'm just joining, I'm learning, and I'm not committing to you fully. So we're all on the same page. But I'm open to that, should this be a good, mutually beneficial opportunity. And the other thing I remind myself of is that when I say yes to something, it means I'm saying no to something else. We're all starting with full plates. So when I say yes to something that's on top of my plate, I'm either saying no to my family for something, which is something that does not align with my values, or I'm saying no to how much I can commit to another project or to supporting a colleague in a different way. And that just helps me, because I think sometimes we can act like I can just keep saying yes, but forget about the consequences of that. So those are my strategies, though I'm certainly not at perfection yet on those.
This is such great advice. And I had a similar experience too, where we were required to choose several, as Sarah as well, choose several committees in the beginning of the year without really knowing any of their missions or what their goals were, what they're hoping to accomplish throughout the semester. And also part of our evaluation is to hold leadership positions within these committees. So to be able to prioritize my time and co-chair one of those committees, for example, to get that experience in leadership as well. I shamelessly asked my chair what she recommended. I said, these are my interests. I'm interested in these 3 committees. There was a list of more than that, I think 6 or 9 or something like that, that you could potentially be a part of. You could have said you wanted to be a part of all of them, right? Essentially, and I'm sure that that's what they were hoping for. The more membership, the better, right? But I chose 3 that aligned with my priorities and my goals, and that I felt like I could contribute the most to, and then went with that. But I also just emailed my chair out of the blue and said, this is what I'm thinking. What do you suggest? Do you think that that's maybe stretching myself too thin as the beginning faculty member, or should I cut back? That sort of thing. So she, of course, answered promptly and thanked me too for asking, because protecting my time is also really important as well.
Yeah, just one quick thing to add to that. I think, and I don't even know how we're going to do this yet, but we need to find a way to kind of be able to say, like, I'm sorry, I messed up and I can't continue on this committee or this project. Going back to it too, is like, if I'm not motivated, I know I'm going to do poor work and they're expecting the best of me. So again, I have no idea what the language for that is, but something that has come up sometimes for me is me just having to like fall on my face and be like, I know I promised you this, but there's no way I can get that to you. And like, now we just need to build how I can kind of, alleviate some of the inconvenience, but I'm not capable of doing the product that you're requesting from me.
That is a great point. I think another thing that I am personally working on is when there is deafening silence when volunteers are asked for, I have such a hard time not saying I will do it because it needs to be done. I know how important it is. And so I will just volunteer, and I have to figure out a way to just be quiet, just wait it out and let other people step up and get it done.
Thank you. That's very helpful. As someone who is looking to make that transition this year, I know that's going to be a struggle, and I appreciate all of your strategies. I would also at this time like to open it up to anyone else and see if they have any additional questions you'd like to ask our panelists. We still have about 15 minutes. So what questions do you have about making that transition to the next phase after your doc program? Sarah?
So I was just wondering, as far as the job search process went, how competitive really was it? How did you select the opportunities? Were you selecting by area, school, availability, position? Like, what happened?
Do you want us to go in the same order?
That's fine.
Okay. I think this one is very individualized, so I'll be interested to hear from everyone else as well. I will say that the job market was extremely competitive. I applied to quite a few positions for assistant professors where I was competing against people whose work I admire and read frequently that were already assistant professors or at times had been at other institutions for some period of time. So I know that who I was competing against or in that same pool with were people who had quite a bit of experience and other things that they brought to the table that I just did not have the time to bring. So yes, it was very, very competitive. I applied to several different places. I think for me, it was a combination of what was I looking for. So I really wanted to go somewhere that they valued my perspective, but at the same time, not everybody had the exact same perspective as me so that we could have these intellectual conversations about what was best for kids. My area of work, I tend to focus on interventions for students with ASD who are primarily in the general education classroom. So I kind of span this world of gen ed and special ed. And I found that for several places that was just like not something they were interested in. So I think for me, at least, it was finding that fit. They talked about fit a lot in my doc program, but I don't really think I figured out what fit meant for me personally until I started to talk with other people and visit other institutions to see, what it looked like at their institution and how they, collaborated together. I will also say my first year, my last year in the doc program, I applied to about 30 different jobs, and Dr. Root will yell at me again, I'm sure, because she did at that time too. And that was a terrible idea. It was awful. I spread myself way too thin, and it just was not a good idea. So the second time on the market, I made a really conscious decision to only apply to jobs that I would truly consider and I thought were things that might be a good fit for me. And that time around, I was far more successful.
So I want to kind of put the disclaimer out that I probably don't have the normal trajectory to getting the your first placement out of your PhD program. I will say that the only way that this was possible, again, was through like the networks and partnerships and collaborations that I was able to do through going to conferences, through my doc program and things like that. But going on the market, the 2019, 2020 in and of itself. There wasn't a lot of places that I was particularly looking for. I had a kind of interesting niche that I wanted to do teaching, but I still wanted to have the opportunity to like build my research and keep going forward. But I didn't want to be in an environment that like really focused on buying out and doing stuff like that. Like I wanted to be in a classroom with teachers, pre-service teachers, giving them that transition, because that's what my research was anyway. So I was seeing like the double dipping originally. So the market really wasn't showing me exactly what I was looking for. I applied to maybe one or two spots and I wasn't really hearing anything back for the time. And then again, my advisor left the year before and transitioned up to the University of Vermont as a chair. And she was saying, hey, we're looking for postdocs because we're trying to build the rigor in our program up here. Would you be interested? And, because of some of the networking opportunities and stuff like that, I was able to get into that position. So I didn't really go through any of the natural like interviewings and things like that. It was kind of like, this is his CV. Here's the group of picking from. Let's grab two of them. And I was lucky enough to be one of the two. So I say that experience to really say that like we all have our individual ways to get there. And as important it is for us to always like make sure we have our own lines of research and make sure our CVs up to par and our what other statements that they need. Another part is making sure that you're like, I guess, not burning bridges and you're open at these conferences so that other people know what your research is and who you are, so they can kind of validate for you more than whatever CV you present them. So yeah, that was kind of my way to hear.
This is a good question. So when I was in my doc program, I think I applied to like 12 faculty postdoc positions probably. I didn't get any faculty responses, and I did get some postdoc options. And then this past year I went back just for ones that I thought would be a really, really good fit. And for me, a fit is, because you asked about that, Sarah, I think a little bit like what different considerations do you have? So for me, it's being able to do teaching and research as Markus described, and also being in a place where I can raise my child and where my partner can also be employed. And that's a lot of different considerations, it turns out, I'm seeing lots of head nods. And so anyways, I had an interview from that process too, and liked the place a lot. I will be on the market again this year. I think that I noticed, because over the years I've always checked, I think there were fewer jobs last year. I also think one thing that can be hard is we will ask faculty, like, how do you get a job? And they did it 15 years ago, maybe, or 20 or 30 years ago, and it's very different now. So, one piece of advice is to ask people who have been on the market more recently, and see what's really worked for them. I know that people often advise, well, before I say this, I also know that there are a lot of people who don't have the job that they wish that they had, and it's not because they did something wrong. It's just a different market. And so you also have to learn how to not take things personally, and again, stay true to your values. There are so many considerations that a hiring committee takes into play, or a PI takes into consideration when they are hiring a postdoc or anything like that. And you really can't predict or control all of it. So it's a nice lesson about control for all of us. One thing I'm trying to learn about is people say, as I said, I'm going on the market again this year. Like, oh, just tell everyone in your network you're going on the market. And I'm like, how do you just email everyone and be like, oh, hey, I need a job. Remember me? So advice is welcome there. I don't know if any of you have advice on that. But it is, to me, in some ways, it's disheartening to hear how much it relies on those networks, because of course that limits people who don't have the same connections as others. But also, in any ways that you can leverage those, I think people find it beneficial.
Some really good advice from everyone so far. And I will tell you just about my experience personally. Of course, during the application process, I tried to match my strengths with the application, with the job requirements. So I would look through and I would be selective in that way, but I was not geographically bound. I was not bound to, I was hoping for a tenure track position, but of course I applied to a lot of different types of positions, clinical, I had a list of more than 30. So I would probably get slapped on the hand from Dr. Root as well. But I don't know if what is, and whoever said this is a personal experience and whatever, that I totally agree with, because I felt anxious. Obviously, everyone does in this time. I was like, okay, this part of my life is ending and I have to figure out what's next. Like, I just felt very anxious about that. And I was doing everything I possibly could control. What could I control? Just apply, just keep applying until you get something. And I applied up until I accepted a position. I was still applying. So, and that was in May, until May. And you just have to kind of, it's a grind, of course. In my opinion, it is a grind. And then until you get what you're looking for, and what you're hoping for, and the broader of a net you cast, of course, the more opportunities that you're going to get. That just is natural, stands to reason. But again, it's very individualized. And I think that if you do, say, for example, you accept a position and it ends up being something that is not working out, but you have a certain, for the tenure track, we say, for example, a certain amount of publications or a certain amount of service hours or things like this that you have for one university is at a lower tier than a place that might make you more competitive. To think in the long term, even when you do accept a position, to make yourself competitive when you do go on a job market again, if you decide to do so, change positions. So, getting comfortable in a way, but also not too comfortable, because you might change your mind. And to obviously, keep pushing yourself to be better and do better, to be more competitive if you decide that the position that you accepted is not really the right fit for you.
A faculty member at Florida State who used to say, work for the job you want, not the job you have. And it was like her motto. So she used to say, if you really want that research position, then, and you're not in one, make sure that you are finding a way to get it done, and vice versa. If you find yourself in a research position and you think you would rather do something else, then find a way to get those experiences so that you can make yourself competitive for the job you really want to have.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask our panelists?
I had a question. I'm not sure. I know most of you that are kind of new to your faculty position, but one of the things that the chair had mentioned to me in my interview for the position I'll start in the fall had mentioned about publishing like without your advisor. And I know that's kind of one of the things I think seems like across the board, most universities are going to try and get you to stop publishing with your advisor. What is your advice on navigating that? I know that my advisor probably expects that, but we obviously am working with her because we have similar interests. So how do you navigate, or at what point do you kind of say like, well, I only was doing that on the road to tenure. Now that I have tenure, we can be friends again and publish together. I'm curious about how that works for you guys and maybe what you've done, advice to go through that process.
I'm probably not the best person to give advice, so I'll be really short. I went directly to my dean and basically said, this is not something I'm willing to give up because this person is like very important to me. So just let me know, how much weight is this worth? Like, will you completely ignore anything that both of our names are on? Or, you know, how would you view this? And then my advisor is amazing because she helps me form connections with other people, and then I can publish with those people as well. So I am very lucky. I kind of have the best of both worlds. So I'm going to shut up now.
No, I think I have to shut up as well, because that's very similar to what I did. I think the biggest thing, especially if you have very similar interests, to figure out who else has those interests. I don't think I will ever stop publishing with my advisor. I'll just try to do it as sparingly as I need the attention, because, you know, there's more, it's more than just research with my advisor. Like, there's a relationship, like I call her mom. So like, she has that relationship with me. So I think it's just understanding where that balance is and realizing who else is in that circle that you can publish with if you want to keep that research centered in that same.
I don't know if we're still going in order. I don't feel like I can advise on this too well since I'm not in a tenure track position. I will say that what people have told me is like that your relationship with your advisor, should you want it to be, is long-term. And I think they typically understand this too. So if you say like, is there a piece of this I can carve out as my own? Is there, and like in the future, I'd love to collaborate. And that's when you might be doing more grant writing together or something like that and become, I don't want to say equal, but just carry different weight and responsibilities together. And I think the thing I try to remind myself is like, if I don't publish with them at this time, it doesn't mean I don't get to work with them later. And I think most advisors seem to get that.
Yeah, I also, I'm not really one to offer too much advice on this, and I would just echo what everyone else was saying. But I think that, especially in our program that we come from at UNC Charlotte, our advisor, my advisor especially, just wants the best for me. And if, if there's a way that he can connect me with who I need to be publishing with or supporting me in my own publications, and he's willing to do that, of course. But also, I think that we're really lucky in the field of special education where there's so much collaboration welcomed that the spirit of my institution really does. It's not frowned upon, of course. Again, we talk about making yourself competitive when in the future and things like that, but checking the boxes that you need to check to make sure that you are putting yourself in a position to be successful and, as someone else mentioned, have the job get the job you want eventually. But just having that piece of self-advocacy where you can just voice what it is that you need, and be able to collaborate with those around you to push those goals forward.
Yeah, and I think one of the quick point is one of the easiest ways is like my advisor always tried to tell me to like make 3 things out of each thing. So if you're doing like a research, then that is your research paper, that might be a conference presentation, and then maybe a practitioner paper. And a lot of times my advisor doesn't want to do the other work. So then those are the opportunities where it's like we wrote the research paper together, but I can write the practitioner paper by myself, or I could do the conference by myself. So then those are ways that I can kind of separate myself, but still be very much with her.
Thank you very much to our panelists. And this seems to be an ongoing theme that we hit our hour mark and could continue to talk for quite a while, but it is 4 o'clock and I want to respect everyone's time. So I really appreciate our panelists for being here this afternoon and sharing their experience with us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much on behalf of the DADD board. This was a great talk.